Welcome everybody to our December episode of the Forest Health Workshop. Tis the season to be jolly, and today we're going to be talking about Christmas tree selection and tree care. Dr. Ball, South Dakota State Forest Health Specialist and SDSU Extension Forester and Professor will be going through the ins and outs of Christmas tree selection, what you should look for, how you should care for your tree, and what to do when the season is over. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Ball after a few quick housekeeping rules. The webinar today is being recorded. That recording will be put on our YouTube playlist and our state website for further viewing. Any SAF certified foresters interested in credits, please put your credentials in the chat, and any of the ISA certified arborists, also please put your credentials in the chat this week, this month rather. We will not be doing the self-reporting. Please put them in the chat box. I'll collect them and we'll make sure that you get your credits for attending this live workshop. If you do have questions as we go through the workshop, please put them in the chat. We'll make sure to have some time at the end to address them. We encourage your participation, and we're excited you could join us. So with that, Dr. Ball, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Tony. And yes, happy holidays to everyone that's on today. And that is a good seasonal thing. Tony and I were thinking what to do for December. Well, how about Christmas trees? I used to work on those when I was in Michigan. That's a big state in terms of production of Christmas trees, at least for the north. And so it's a lot of fun. But, most people didn't realize, we could take 8 to 11 years to grow that tree that they're putting up in their house. Well, one of the things I get to do every year is harvest the state capital Christmas tree. And by the way, that tree comes from donations, and every tree that I've gone out to take down, the reason the people nominated it is it was getting too big for the site. And so, it made sense rather than just cut it down and chip it. Why not let it spend a month in the capital? So we've had some spectacular trees over the years, most of them blue spruce, but we did have an Engelmann spruce one year. How's that for unusual? But it's a lot of fun. Get to go out and work with cranes and make sure everything's harvested properly. That's usually about the first week of November. But it's always fun for all you South Dakotans and even Nebraskans and North Dakotans, if you're close enough, to go through the capital during this holiday season because it is truly spectacular. Well, get a fresh tree to avoid the Charlie Brown tree, one that drops all its needles. Christmas trees are like everything else. They have a limited shelf life. And most of us want a tree that we can put up at Thanksgiving, put up at Thanksgiving, at least have it go through Christmas. In fact, if between Thanksgiving and Christmas, there were only 4 weekends, that couple of days following Thanksgiving, that Friday and Saturday and Sunday, actually is where we sold most of the trees. If we had just done those 3 days and closed the rest of the year, we still would have made quite a bit of money. So a lot of people have already gotten their trees, but when we have long ones like this, people tend to put it off, particularly it doesn't seem that cold, does it? So let's go over a little bit of selection and care of these trees. Now, I do like real Christmas trees, living Christmas trees, in the sense that it was alive. It's no longer alive. But yes, they can represent a fire hazard if they are not cared for properly. The big tree that goes in the Capitol, they put a fire retardant on it. Now, again, that's because it's a public building and there's a lot of other rules for it, and it's a huge tree. The biggest thing for everybody here is just keep water in the stand. Make sure it's not in direct sunlight and keep water in the stand. But I'll go over some of the finer details here this afternoon. You know what? It's a losing battle. I'll say this, that more people have an artificial tree than have a real tree. It actually flipped a little bit during COVID. One, people weren't going out to the big box stores as much, and what a better way to spend Christmas than to go out on a choose and cut Christmas tree, or just go out to a Christmas tree lot. You're outside, you're not so much worried about the germs and that, and people kind of got back to doing things as families. Now it's fading a little bit, and a lot of people are going back to convenience. I understand that. and they're going out and buying their artificial trees, usually about Halloween. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's amazing how long Christmas decorations are up nowadays. And they do have their place. But let me give you this little tidbit here. The only way they're environmentally sound is if you keep them for over 20 years. If you have the same tree you had in the early 2000s, you've crossed that line where it made more environmental sense to have a fake tree than it would be to harvest a real tree. The average life, though, of one of these fake trees is actually about 5 years. A lot of people get tired of it and go off to something else, and now you've got a landfill issue. So, again, just pointing out there's a lot of benefits to real Christmas trees. And hopefully some of you are going to take advantage of getting out and harvest your own tree or go to a Christmas tree lot. They are spectacular, though. It's a lot of fun, and I'm going out to the lots now. Now, by the way, there's a shortage of Christmas trees this year. Now, it's not a major shortage, and you find some saying, no, don't really worry about it. But the problem is they cut back on production about, what, 9, 10, 11 years ago. There just weren't the sales. And then COVID hit. And they started harvesting trees early. They go, oh my gosh, everybody wants trees, and harvesting them at 5 feet rather than letting them get to 6 feet, harvesting at 6 feet rather than letting them get to 7 feet. So they kind of eaten to their inventory. And so now that COVID is over and people aren't buying as much, those that are looking for them are finding that there's fewer selections and the prices have gone up. But prices going up is pretty common with everything, isn't it? The freshest tree is the one you cut yourself. Now, there's fewer of those available. We do have them in eastern South Dakota. And if you live in western South Dakota, you can go in the Black Hills and harvest your own tree with a permit. So you do have to chat with the Forest Service and get a permit there. But if you can't, you can go to a lot. Now, a lot of those trees at Christmas tree lots were actually cut in early November or late October even. So that shelf life is shrinking, particularly this year when it's been so warm. So I would expect we're going to see a shorter lifespan with those trees you're harvesting at the lots. Again, is that going to be a major factor? No, unless you're one of those people that says, I like to put the tree up at Thanksgiving and take it down at Easter. Because you're going to find a lot of these will look like the Charlie Brown tree by then. You cut it yourself, you know exactly how fresh it is. You cut it that day. By the way, one of the things that's fairly common for Christmas tree plantations is the blocks you're not harvesting this year. You spray them with something that has an odor to it. Box urine is one of the ingredients to give you an idea. And it really doesn't smell until you get it inside. And we had somebody one time that drove a snowmobile, and I'll tell you, snowmobiles were actually a problem. Once snowmobiles appeared, people could literally go out to your Christmas tree plantation and harvest trees a lot easier than walking in. And somebody went out and harvested a tree, which they weren't supposed to. Signage was there, took it home, set it up, and then went away for the whole weekend. When they came back, their house smelled so bad, they in fact sued us, even though there was signage. Apparently it cost about $4,000 they had to put deionizing equipment on there. So if you ever see a sign, these trees have been sprayed, don't cut them, don't cut them. All right, you're going to regret that for that Christmas. Well, how do you check that a tree is fresh? Shake it. When you're standing there with the tree that you're buying at the Christmas tree lot, when you shake it, just kind of thud it a couple of times lightly. You shouldn't see a lot of needles fall. There's always going to be some. And then run your finger along the shoot, kind of like you're pulling the needles. Now, not tightly, you're not trying to rip them off, but you're just giving enough resistance that if they're ready to fall, they will. And if the needles spring right back as you're pulling the hand and not a lot of needles come off, and the twigs still bend a little bit, depending on the species, that tree is still fresh. And you really want to look for those. The ones that may have been harvested too early, you shake them and you got a pile of needles underneath there. When you grab the branch, the shoot, and pull it, the needles readily come off. And that's not the best tree to buy. Now look at this one. Look at all the needles near the base. and it's on this tree or was on this tree. You shake that tree and the needles just tumble out of it. So this would be a very bad purchase choice for someone, because they better be planning on leaving it up for a weekend, and that's about it. The needles are fading very quickly. Well, how do you keep it fresh? Recut the base when you get it home, even if you cut your own tree. The reason for that, the pores that pull water up obviously are going to have a lot of sap to it as well, because that's what conifers do. They produce sap. Maybe it's not as the thick, gooey sap you sometimes see on pines and spruce, but they do produce sap. It's kind of a defense for them. And that, so recut the base, just cut it straight. Angle does not matter. Straight, why not? It's simple. Place it in a stand that will hold at least a gallon of water. Most people's Christmas tree stands are too small. And then check it daily and add water. And I'll tell you this, if you put up your tree and you add water right away, which is what you should do, and you got busy for a weekend and you look at that stand and it's completely dried out and you go, oh my gosh, that must have dried out yesterday. There's no going back. You've got sap already plugging those pores, and you're going to add water and it's going to evaporate. So it'll disappear a little bit, but it's not going into the plant. The only way you could redo that, pull the whole tree out, which you're not going to do, recut the base and put it back in. So that's real important. Cut the base again, immediately put it up in the stand. Now, for somebody to say, well, I brought it home, but I need to have it sit for this afternoon or that, put it in a shaded location. And if you get to it the next day, that's fine too. But no matter what, recut the base. And then never put a Christmas tree next to a window, particularly on the south side. It's going to get too much heat and it's going to give off with a little moisture it can pull up. Remember, it doesn't have roots. The only water it's getting is in that Christmas tree stand. And you don't want it near heat vents, and heaven forbid you put it next to the fireplace. Those are all classic no-nos for real Christmas trees. And don't drill holes in the trunk. It's amazing how many people do that. Well, I want to drill a hole so the water goes in. No, the water goes in more along the edges than in the middle. If you cut the base right, drilling holes is not going to be of any help whatsoever. So just cut the base right and immediately stick it in water and make sure that the stand never goes dry. That's a good size stand. The little silhouette is a very poor stand. That would be a great stand for an artificial tree, because you're not putting much water in that at all. And when you put your tree up, it can take up to a gallon or a gallon and a half of water that first day. If you've got a larger tree, it can even take 2 gallons. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed that or been surprised by it. You bring a 7-foot tree in, it's kind of up to your ceiling, and you put it up, you recut the base, put it up, add water, and then you look at it 6 hours later and half that water's gone because it's being absorbed. That's a good thing. If it didn't move at all, that would be a bad thing. So keep adding water. Never let the stand go dry. That's one of the key things to keeping it fresh. And start with a clean stand. I don't know about you. There's the one I had in the garage, kind of put it up there and forgot about it. And that is really not the ideal stand. So you got to clean it, add a little bleach, clean it all out. Now, by the way, you're mostly doing that so you don't get mold in there. It's not that you've got a lot of infectious diseases in there that are going to cause your Christmas tree to seal the pores quicker. It's really kind of an aesthetic and an odor soda thing. So clean it out. It's a good way to start. If you're like me, it's one of those things that I wait around and do until I'm just about ready to get the tree. Then I'll wash the darn thing out because it's been sitting in the garage all season. Don't use preservatives. Floral preservatives, commercial tree preservatives, the ones you can buy, they really don't work. A lot of them are just sugar. Molasses, oh please, no. You want to get a real sticky tree stand, add that. Sugar, 7-Up is a real common one. People say, should I add 7-Up to it? Well, only if you're going to drink out of it. Bleach, nope. Aspirin, no, unless it has a headache. Honey, heaven forbid. That's just going to make a mess. And then vodka, which is a waste of an incredibly valuable product. But all these kind of home remedies really don't help. But there was a recent study, and I mean a study as opposed to someone put it up on the internet, but they found, and I think it was Michigan State because they are big Christmas tree growers, adding hot water, not boiling, but hot. And I do mean hot, but not boiling. For the first watering is helpful in opening up the sappy pores. So, get your tea kettle all set, fill that up, or put a pan on the stove,
Gonna see what you got.
warm the water. Don't get it to the point that it's scalding. You just want to keep it really warm and add that water in, that first water in. That will help break down some of the goo as well and help it permeate through the tree. And by the way, every year we get insect problems. This is a giant conifer aphid. That's what it's called. It's found out in the Black Hills, found a lot of it. That's the eggs. And every year I get someone saying, we're finding these insects on our tree, and they're aphids. The eggs will hatch in your house. You put up the tree at Thanksgiving, just before Christmas, you're going to get another present. You're going to find aphids walking up and down the branches and that. You won't find a lot, and no, they're not going to attack anything else in your house. But I do get people that are a little worried about it. Say, they'll send me samples and say, what is this? And again, it's not a real concern, but it was on the tree when you bought it. I got this last winter, and that's Western gall rust. Someone was getting a tree out in the Black Hills, and there is Western gall rust out there, and they were wondering what that was and would that be harmful? And no, not for your Christmas tree. And then every now and then I get this, not every year, but every few years, someone will send me a picture and they'll say, Dr. Ball, my Christmas tree is growing. What should I do? It's not growing. There's not roots in that stand. But what can happen if it was cold before it was harvested and then it's warm in your house, the male cones, which are the lowest on plants, those will start to develop. And like I said, every few years I get a picture from somebody and it looks like this. They look like a regular little cone. Remember, the male cones just fall apart very quickly. The cones we look at and conifers are really the female cones, as we call them. They have to produce the seeds. But if you find these little cones at the tip, look like little pineapples, it's pretty much normal. If the tree went through a cold state, we had a cold November and then it warmed up a little bit, and then you put it in a house that is really warm, you'll actually get these. 3 things you're looking for in a Christmas tree: fragrance, stiffness of twigs, and needle retention. One of the values of getting a real Christmas tree is being able to smell it. I mean, you want to walk in that house and go, oh my gosh, this does have that Christmassy smell. And trees vary in that characteristic, so we're going to discuss that. Stiffness of twigs. Now, that can be fairly important. Some people like to put on some fairly heavy ornaments, and those ornaments may cause the branches to bend and even have the ornaments fall off. So a stiff branch that can actually hold ornaments is valuable for many folks. And then you want it to retain needles. The best needle retention are the first. Those are the trees you can put up at Thanksgiving and take down in mid-January. And if you've taken care of it, the needles really won't have fallen yet. Spruce are one of the worst. If you say, John, I really want a Colorado blue spruce in my house, don't put it up for another week or so. In fact, another week or so, if you can go out and cut one at a Christmas tree plantation, that would be even better, because their needle retention in a warm house in particular can be relatively short. And by that, I mean weeks. Of course, you're going to get those needles caught in your socks too. But let's take a look. Here's the most common trees. Scots pines was number 1 in this country for a long time. Good fragrance, excellent stiffness, excellent needle retention. White pine is fairly good as well, but white pine, you don't see it sold that much. Reason why is you can't really put a lot of ornaments on it. The branches will just bend and they'll fall off. White spruce, which is Black Hill spruce, fragrance can be poor. Now, not always, but I do want to let you know that some of them have actually a musty odor. You put the tree up and you notice this odor and you go, well, is it in this tree stand or something? No, it's actually the tree, and not every tree, and not even the majority of white spruce, but it happens enough that I wanted to mention that. Fairly good stiffness, but spruce are not good at needle retention. And so this is fair. Blue spruce right below it is good, which again is generally about a 3-week shelf life to have it before you've had too many needles get down into the carpet. Douglas fir is getting a little bit more popular, very good fragrance, but fair on stiffness. You got to watch the ornaments, but very good needle retention. Balsam fir is very close to it, but look at Fraser fir. Very good fragrance, just one of the best. But the needles, the twigs are not that stiff, but excellent needle retention. I mean, Fraser firs, which are being sold everywhere, really are a great tree for those folks that like to put up a tree early and keep it around into January for a little bit. It still retain its needles, and the needles are fairly soft. And then finally, cedars or junipers. Now, notice these are not the best Christmas trees. Somebody's going to argue with me on that, I'm sure. You know what the interesting thing is on cedars? Is that if you go south, and I mean the deep south, you go down to the Southwest, for example, or even Georgia and that, junipers are a very popular Christmas tree because they'll tolerate the weather conditions there. So, if you get a relative coming up from New Mexico and they go, well, what's your tree? And you go, well, I bought a Fraser fir. And they go, why not a cedar? And you're going, oh my gosh, cedars, they're coming up in everybody's pasture. But they can be a tree. I mean, good fragrance, good stiffness, fair needle retention. But, if you can cut it out of your pasture, what the heck, you got a tree. And like I said, it is a very popular tree in the South, and it does work extremely well. So much that you can go down south and the stores sell artificial cedar trees. How's that? Well, I'll get a real one. And like you say, a Southern favorite. Well, again, the firs are one of our best. When you grab the needles, they're fairly soft. Again, excellent retention for them. Their prices right now for a 6 to 7 foot one are going about $62. Price increase has not been that much. It's actually availability is more an issue this year because again, they kind of cut into their stock during COVID. It takes a while to grow these trees. But needles are single. So if you look along the twig, needles are single there. They're flat. So if you grab a needle, you can't roll it in your finger. Okay, it's flat. The needles are a 1/2 inch to about 1 inch long, dark green on top and light on the underside. Again, just an outstanding tree. If you grab those needles, they're soft. If some come out and get in your carpet and you walk over them when your socks, it's not going to be a painful experience. And since it has some of the best needle retention, you're going to find that's a fairly minimal problem. And to give you an idea of the size, I've got a quarter up there as a scale, but this is really the premier Christmas tree. Scots pines used to be. It used to be the #1 for decades. Still is very common. I see it at Christmas tree lots here. Good fragrance. It's not as great as white pine, but excellent stiffness and excellent needle retention. So it certainly does receive its claim there. Pines have needles in clusters, what we call fascicles. So they're in bundles. Scots pines, the needles are in bundles of 2. They're about 1 to 4 inches long and kind of a bluish green to them. And again, a lot of people like that bluish green color. It's great when you're putting up ornaments in that. And again, the branch stiffness is such, you can put some of those heavy ornaments on. I don't know if anyone here has had that where you put an ornament on and then you watch the whole branch just bend. Spruce, fragrance on white spruce is poor. Good for blue spruce, Colorado spruce. Colorado spruce is excellent stiffness. You could hang a bowling ball from the branches, but only good needle retention. They're not my favorite tree personally, but I know a lot of people do like the white spruce, particularly out in the Black Hills. It's a nice tree to get. But again, harvest it after Thanksgiving, kind of like next week, once our little heat spell's over, and you'll be able to keep it up over Christmas, particularly if you keep the stand wet all the time. White spruce needles are single, but they're four-sided. So if you want to know, well, am I really looking at a spruce if they don't have it labeled? If you can twirl the needle in your finger, okay, it's not flat then white spruce and blue spruce are the two most common spruce you're going to find out there. Occasionally there'll be a Norway spruce for sale and a Serbian, which is a flat needle spruce. But by and large, it's white spruce and blue spruce. Again, you look at these, and white spruce has an advantage in that it's really available. I mean, you can harvest it yourself out in the Black Hills. Blue spruce, on the other hand, needles are single, about an inch long, pale. They can be a pale tree to almost a silvery blue. But, we always sold some, and you know who I sold them to? People with cats. Anyone here have a cat that climbs the Christmas tree? Heaven forbid you're watching that cat scamper up, or worse, two cats scamper up, and you're watching the ornaments. This is like trying to go through a porcupine. Cats tend to stay away from them. However, on the reverse, those are very sharp needles, and cats don't tend to chew on needles, but I would also recommend sweeping them up every day so your cat doesn't nibble on some and cough them up. But if you have a cat, you know what, you're worried about the cat climbing, or the cat does climb, blue spruce is not a climbable tree. Douglas fir is becoming a little bit more popular. I'm seeing those in eastern South Dakota. Fragrance is very good. Stiffness is only fair. It is similar to a fir. And the needle retention is very good. Now, the Fraser firs, the true firs, Fraser fir, balsam fir, cannon fir, those are all common firs you can buy. Great needle retention. Some, by the way, are coming as far as North Carolina for the sale. And in fact, we actually had an insect move in, the elongate hemlock scale, coming in not on Christmas trees, but it actually came in on greens or wreaths that were actually shipped from North Carolina. We've been doing inspecting this year, and I haven't found any yet. It was about 2020, which we noticed at first, as well as Minnesota. And it seems like nurseries have got a pretty good handle on it. And we're not really seeing it. And by the way, that insect is from Asia, the elongate hemlock scale, and it certainly feeds on more than hemlock. It will feed on firs, which is the big one. But if you find these, they're a good tree, soft needle too. So if you run into the tree at the middle of the night, it isn't going to hurt, not like a blue spruce, which will be incredibly painful. The needles are single and flat. Remember, pines are the only ones that have needles in bundles, what we call fascicles. And the needles here are about a ½ inch to an inch and a quarter, and dark green, so kind of nice. All right, I'm going to mention it. I know out by Murdo, some people use these. And I heard our former state forester really liked these. But if you're from New Mexico, you do. And they don't use our eastern red cedar, though. Interesting enough, in the coastal areas of Virginia, they actually use eastern red cedar for Christmas trees. But you get down to the south, and there's a species or two of junipers that are being used. And again, are they the most fragrant tree? No, but they're not bad. And they're commonly available. Some people could say, I can just go out to my pasture and harvest one, which may not be a bad idea. Needles here are very, very small. They're scale-like, as we call them, or awl-like, almost needle-like. And then if you're getting a Rocky Mountain juniper, the West River folks, for a Christmas tree, quite often it will have what we call the berries still on it. Those are not berries. Those are actually a very compressed cone. It's not going to harm anybody if little Jimmy pulls them off and chews on them. They are used as a flavoring for gin. So there you go. You can make your holiday punch with them. But otherwise, they're, just kind of a nice tree. And the Rocky Mountain juniper has a little bit more of a bluish color to them, or they can. And that and the cones can make it a very attractive Christmas tree. So don't overlook them. It's not the most popular, but it is out there. And again, if you head in other areas of the country, you'll find they're very popular. In fact, some areas, the most popular Christmas trees are the cedars. But again, that real tiny foliage that's compressed as well. Oh, no larches though. Larch, of course, drops its needles, so we don't want that. And obviously, want everyone to have a happy holiday. But I'm not done yet. I do have one or two more. We've covered the Christmas trees, but I want to end with this note, and that is if you're hanging lights outside on your trees, will you please remember to take them off? Every 3 to 5 years, so it's not very common, I'll go out to look at a tree that the top is dying, and I noticed that it was actually a fairly nicely sheared tree for a while. And I'll climb up in that tree, or I'll put a ladder up in that tree. You know what I'll find? I'll find the lights and the cord actually embedded in the trunk. And you ask the person, hey, you know what? You ever use this with Christmas lights? And the common answer is, we used to. I always like it because there's always a hesitation. We used to. And they never took them off. And it will girdle the tree. So use a little caution with that. It's kind of nice, especially this year. You've had a lot of good weather to put the outdoor lights on. But make sure you take them off after the holidays if they're tightly wrapped around branches of the trunk, because they will and can and have girdled trees. So that's it for the presentation. This was a little shorter than our typical one, but we thought we'd do something very seasonal. I don't know if we have any questions. It might just be, Tony, it might just be people putting in their number, or do we have a question or two?
I don't have any questions in the chat
Okay.
right now. I'll give everybody another minute or two to put in their SAF or ISA credentials. And it does have one question here from Lori. How about
Yeah.
white fur compared to any other of the furs?
And that's a good question, Lori. We don't see a lot of white fur up here, mainly because we're beyond where it really grows well. I do know some growers in southern Wisconsin and Iowa that have it. Perhaps you have them in Nebraska. It actually holds up fairly well for needle retention. The reason it's not quite as popular as the Fraser firs and that, though I love the color, is the needles are longer. People like short needles on their trees. It really helps you put the ornaments in that. But in terms of needle retention, it's as good. Branch stiffness is about the same, meaning it's not as strong. Fragrance, though, is not as good as a Fraser fir or a balsam fir, but they are a good tree, and some people love that color. So it's certainly a good choice for people.
Well, great. Thanks, Dr. Ball. That looks like all the questions we have. Another moment here to put in any sort of credentials, SAF or ISA. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Thank you, Dr. Ball, for the information. Wishing everybody a very happy holiday season, and we'll plan to talk to you in the new year.
And in fact, for the new year, Tony, we'll start out with predictions for 2024. So at the end of the year, we can go back and see if my crystal ball was good enough. So, wait for the notice. It'll be out probably the second week. We tend to do that in January. And we can see what Dr. Ball's going to predict for the 2024 season in terms of plants. I will not discuss elections. All right. We'll just leave that as it is. But yeah, we'll let you know what's going. So as Tony said, happy holidays for everybody. Thank you for joining in with us this afternoon.